Hey, so I'm going to do things a little differently. I'm going to talk about someone that I've mentioned a couple of months ago, just before the holiday season began. And I am going to talk about him, and I'm going to explain at the end why I'm mentioning him. He's not someone who would basically fit my demographics, but he's a person that's in the shadows that's influencing a lot of what you're seeing, particularly from alt-right movements, alt-right think tanks, and even people in our community, i.e. the Black community, that are influenced by his historical books and his paleo-conservative way of approaching American history. And that person is David Barton. Before you think I am clapping because I am a fan of his work, it's totally the other way around. I despise his work. I really do. And I will explain to you initially how I became familiar with this person. Back in 2008, 2009, when Obama was running and became elected President of the United States of America, David Barton was literally one of the first people to come out full force and to really show disdain towards Obama. If I was to tell you what he said about Obama, I would be here longer than needed to be. But you might remember him because he was a fixture on Fox News, Fox Channel, and he was one of Glenn Beck's frequent guests. And Glenn Beck says he's a historian, and Glenn Beck was a fan of his work, and he would basically promote his historical books, which are pseudo, and I'm going to get to that later. But why I'm speaking about it is because his books he's been spoken about the past year very highly by a group of Black paleocons, not conservatives, paleocons in our community that have cited his work as the reason for the United States being a Christian nation. That we're not a nation of different groups of ideologies. We're more of a theocracy, which means we're a government based on a particular religion, and our laws and statutes are based on such. That is what David Barton believes in. Okay? So, I did research around November, December, because I said I remember this name back when I was forced to quit my job and have to stay at home and have to watch all these different shows, and I couldn't stand it. And I heard this man, and I knew he was phony and a hypocrite, and I just loathed him. I just knew there was something wrong about him, but it took me over a decade later to find out what it is. So when I was doing research, I happened up on the Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, the Southern Poverty Law Center, they go after Black people too, okay? We're not going to, make it seem like they're just going after right-wing hate groups. They go after some Black groups too. They have a list of Black identity extremism, okay? So it's anyone who preaches hate against specific groups or different groups or promotes their ideology as if it's the right and everybody else is wrong, condemning people who go to hell, or that falls in line with being a hate group. So he falls under the extremist group. So this is pretty much a semi-biography, but it's also, dissecting the beliefs and what David Barton claims is true for American history. So I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to tell you what is leading me to read this. So it reads, David Barton, named by Time in 2005 as one of the nation's 25 most influential evangelicals, David Barton is a self-styled historian who has acted as a key bridge between the mainstream political right and radical right religious ideology. So, extremist info. Born in 1954. Location, Aledo, Texas. Ideology, anti-LGBTQ. So, that's basically what he's mostly known for. He's anti-LGBTQ. But I'm going to tell you something about him later on after I finish reading this bio. About David Barton. David Barton's ascendant star as a self-taught, in quotations, historian, an influential leader of the evangelical far right, crashed in a storm of ridicule when the world's largest Christian publisher recalled Barton's 2012 book, The Jefferson Lies, for too many serious whoppers, the kind of gross factual mistakes that are a death knell for any real historian. A prolific propagandist, Barton has long promoted the canard that our founding fathers never intended the separation of church and state, but rather sought to construct a Christian nation. His Texas-based group, Wall Builders, sells an abundant bounty of books and DVDs, pushing Barton's funhouse vision of religious patriotism. And this distorted message has sold well. Anointed one of the 25 most influential evangelicals by Time magazine in 2005, Barton has been a political consultant to the Republican National Committee and served as vice chairman of the Texas Republican Party. Although even a large group of conservative Christian history scholars have meticulously refuted the claims of his Jefferson book, Barton continues to sell it and to promote his views online and in the media. In his own words, money does not belong to the government. It belongs to the individuals. And to steal money from individuals through whatever government spending program is taking private property, and you're not supposed to do that. Wall Builders broadcast January 2011. Jesus says the sun shines on the just. The rain falls on the wicked. God treats everybody exactly the same. Whether you're rich or poor, you pay a 10% tithe. The concept of justice goes out with the progressive income tax, which is why the Bible is opposed to it, making the Constitution obsolete. Understanding what is happening to America's economic and cultural heritage, an educational DVD marked by the American Family Association. There's a passage that I love in Romans, and I'm going to get to Romans when I finish reading this. Romans 1. It talks about homosexuality, and it says that they will receive in their bodies the penalties of their behavior. The Bible is right every time, and that's why AIDS has been something they haven't discovered a cure for or a vaccine for. And that goes to what God says. Hey, you're going to bear in your body the consequences of this homosexual behavior. Wall Builders broadcast, April 27th, 2012. People use Jefferson all the time and say, hey, you can't do religious stuff at a school. Jefferson's opposed to it. He wasn't opposed to that kind of thing. The Daily Show, Comedy Central, May 1st, 2012. His background. The self-proclaimed historian has lived most of his life in the Fort Worth, Texas suburb of Aledo. After earning a BA in religious education at Oral Roberts University, Barton taught at religiously affiliated schools. Although he has no academic credentials in history, in 1987, Barton founded a company called Specialty Research Associates Incorporated, whose stated goal was to do historical research relating to America's constitutional, moral, and religious heritage. In 1988, the company morphed into Wall Builders, a multi-purpose propaganda machine promoting Barton's view that the United States was founded as a Christian nation and therefore ought to be ruled by biblical principles. Barton quickly got busy revising history according to his convictions. He's now written 10 books that are sold on the Wall Builders website. He also began to host a Wall Builders linked national syndicated radio show that Trump is anti-gay and anti-government views. Doesn't he remind you of somebody that I mentioned past couple of weeks? Get to that too. Through Wall Builders, Barton branched out into public policy in 1998 by launching what he called the Pro-Family Legislative Network to help conservative, God-fearing legislators. The group's annual conference and regular updates still keep several hundred state and national legislators apprised of pro-family legislation. That includes bills to ban abortion and prevent gay marriage, support religious expression in public schools and public life, and resist gun control. The network provides expert referrals for legislation and supportive research. Its conferences also offer media training and strategy sessions to far-right lawmakers who want tips on how to succeed in getting their legislative agenda through. As his reputation grew, Barton made political inroads into the Republican mainstream, and from 1997 to 2006, he was vice chairman of the Texas Republican Party. In 2004, the Republican National Committee hired him as a consultant during that year's presidential campaign. Barton's charge was to reach out to evangelical clergy, and media reports indicate he spoke to hundreds of local evangelical pastors in his drive to get George W. Bush reelected that year. Barton ultimately became a go-to man for tips on lassoing conservative Christian voters. He has served as an advisor to Newt Gingrich, Michelle Bachmann, Kansas Governor Sam Brownback, and Mike Huckabee. With his Leave It to Beaver looks, the silver-haired Barton has an "aw shucks" Tommy Sawyer-esque manner, and is personally quite engaging as he spins historical revisions. In his 2005 piece on the nation's most influential evangelicals, Time magazine pictured Barton in a white cowboy hat, calling him a hero to millions, including some powerful politicians. Brownback has said that Barton provides the philosophical underpinning for a lot of the Republican effort in the country today. Also among Barton's most ardent fans is Huckabee, the Republican conservative from Arkansas, who declared in 2011, a year before his failed presidential run, "I don't know anyone in America who is a more effective communicator. I just wish that every single young person in America would be able to be under his tutelage and understand something about who we really are as a nation. I almost wish that there would be something like a simultaneous telecast and all Americans could be forced at gunpoint, no less, to listen to every David Barton message." As a regular since 2010 on Glenn Beck's Founders Fridays radio broadcast and a teacher in Beck's online university, Barton's outreach has continued to grow, but along the way and even before the Jefferson book debacle, his nose should have been growing too, as the web of his untruths became even denser. Some of Barton's false claims about history and politics appear to stem from simple ignorance, but others have been exposed as flagrant omissions and distortions that bend reality to his fact-free vision of American history. For example, Barton has claimed that President Ronald Reagan, even after surviving an assassination attempt, opposed gun control. That's entirely false. In fact, after being shot in 1981, Reagan voiced clear support for the Brady gun control bill in an opinion piece published by and in the New York Times. Another Barton whopper is his repeated claim that John Adams supported religious control of the U.S. government. To make that point, Barton quoted the following Adams passage: "There is no authority, civil or religious. There can be no legitimate government. But what is administered by this Holy Ghost? There can be no salvation without it. All without it is rebellion and perdition, or, in more orthodox words, damnation." But Barton conveniently omits the next part of the quote. in which Adams makes it clear, crystal clear, he is mocking those with this belief. As People for the American Way, a liberal group, concluded on his website, he has deliberately, clearly, and completely transformed Adams' actual meaning. And one of the founders for People for the American Way is actually the television creator Norman Lear. He's one of the people that created it in response to the whole paleo-conservative movement that was coming out in the late 60s, early 1970s. I just wanted you to get this sense of that. A fervent homophobe, Barton has claimed that gay people died decades earlier than others and have more than 500 partners apiece in their lifetimes. On his War Builders radio broadcast, he's flagrantly misled listeners by saying that leading pediatric association in America has cautioned educators against providing education about homosexuality. But the American College of Pediatricians that Barton referred to has only a couple of hundred members and is in fact a right-wing breakaway group from the 60,000 members American Academy of Pediatrics, which is the real leading pediatric association in America. The group he cited split with the American Academy of Pediatrics explicitly because it had taken an official stand that there is no harm associated with same-sex parenting. Some of Barton's claims are mind-boggling to any reasonably well-educated person. For example, in his version of history, the Founding Fathers, in quotations, already had the entire debate on creation and evolution and shows creationism. Reality check. Charles Darwin didn't publish his theory of evolution in The Origin of Species until 1859, more than half a century after the Founding Fathers were active. Barton also has asserted that the American Revolution was fought to free slaves. No. That's why we said we want to separate from Britain so we can end slavery. Barton said, actually, that's ridiculous. I even know that. Many of the Founding Fathers were slaveholders. Slavery is acknowledged, although it is not named in the Constitution that they wrote, and the British Empire outlawed slavery 3 decades later before the United States did. Barton has also promoted the anti-immigrant cause and engaged in Muslim bashing. He opposes immigration reform, saying that God established national borders. Tell that to the Russians and the Poles, who have seen their borders change repeatedly over the course of history, and has appeared on the radio show of hardline nativist William Gein. Barton cited infamous Islamophobe Robert Spencer in attacking U.S. Representative Keith Ellison, Democrat from Minnesota, who is the first Muslim congressman, and he's currently the Attorney General of Minnesota, of the state of Minnesota, who actually was one of the people that felt that the shooter of, the killer of George Floyd should be convicted. I want to make that clear. Okay? In 2010, Barton joined the battle to boulderize the Texas Social Studies curriculum for public schools. Now, I want people to hear this very clearly. He supported efforts to excise Martin Luther King Jr. and 1960s farm worker activist Cesar Chavez from textbooks, meaning that he wanted them removed. He wanted these two very important activists to be removed. As reported by Washington Monthly, Barton said King didn't deserve to be included for advancing minority rights because only majorities can expand political rights. I gotta hold my tongue on that until I finish. After establishing a 25-year record of big lie propaganda, Barton finally got taken down in a decisive way in 2012. And among the most effective at eviscerating his reputation were fellow Christian conservatives, his own people, his own ilk. Barton's book, The Jefferson Lies, had actually made the New York Times bestsellers list. But then Jay Richards of the Discovery Institute, a think tank known for its advocacy of intelligent design, asked 10 conservative Christian professors to evaluate Barton's work. They found the book riddled with errors. Professors Warren Throckmorton and Michael Coulter of Grove City College, a conservative Christian school in Pennsylvania, even wrote another book in 2012, Getting Jefferson Right, Fact-Checking Claims About Our Third President, that debunks Barton's claims. The same year, Richards said that Barton's books and videos were full of embarrassing factual errors, suspiciously selective quotes, and highly misleading claims. The coup de grace also came in 2012 when readers of the History News Network voted Barton's new book the least credible history book in print. The nonpartisan network, affiliated with George Mason University, describes its mission as putting current events in historical perspective and features articles by prominent historians. Meanwhile, a multi-ethnic coalition of evangelical ministers based in Cincinnati asked Thomas Nelson, the book's Christian publisher, to withdraw the book. The pastor said that the book inaccurately portrayed Jefferson's true views on race, his record as a slaveholder, and his negative views on Jews. You can't be serious about racial unity in church while holding up Jefferson as a civil rights hero and champion of freedom, the Reverend Ray McMillan told Grove professor Throckmorton for an article published on the crosswalk.com website. After all of this pressure and negative publicity, a Nelson spokesman announced in August 2012 that the publishing company had reviewed Barton's book and found enough errors to recall copies not yet sold and stop new shipments. This came despite the book's commercial success. And I remember that when the book dropped and everybody in the conservative world really bought it. And they were praising it. And it was bothering me. His reputation in tatters, Barton accused the critics of exaggerating his claims about Jefferson's Christian faith. Then he reportedly bought up 17,000 remaining copies from Nelson and continued to sell them on Amazon. He also said that he would publish a new edition. It wasn't clear where. That won't include any substantial changes, but will alter a few phrases to clear up any confusion. Barton still retains some influence, but only in the most extreme and uneducated segments of the Christian right. Virtually all serious conservatives have repudiated him, and his chances of making a comeback seem remote. To be kind, although he sounds just as glib and sure as himself as ever. Well, here's the thing about that. If it wasn't for the likes of people such as Ricky Williams, Bevel and Betty, I would basically say, yeah, he wouldn't have a chance to make a comeback. But this is a black couple that has quoted, especially Ricky Williams, who quotes him extensively, who basically shows off the books that he owns that was published by him and written by him. And he basically talks about how this man is telling the truth about American history and how we've all been lied to. And he quotes David Barton. And they are black. And they basically advocate on a lot of black conservative issues or conservatism in American culture, but more in terms of being black. That is dangerous, okay? Because if you can basically make a comeback with show nonsense through black people, and impressionable black people, particularly young people, get a hold of this and start spreading it, our community will be in shambles intellectually, and this has to stop. But before I go further, I want to say something. In that very book, he mentioned that Sally Hemings was not Thomas Jefferson's mistress, nor did he actually father children with Sally Hemings. So he even tried to basically claim that Sally Hemings didn't really even exist, that she was just a slave on a plantation, and that he never had an affair with her, let alone a whole bunch of children that was black, that some of them grew up with red hair and moved to Ohio. That's a whole other story. So I'm going to go back and say what I have to say. David Barton is dangerous. And David Barton is one of the many people that is a revisionist of history, in American history at that. And he's doing this because he's one of the many people who in the late 60s, well, in his case, early 70s, who did not like the fact that black people in this country received protections under the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Civil Rights Voting Rights Act, and we had protections coming to us in all sorts of ways, and those protections also benefited communities such as the Latino community, the Asian community. It also benefited people of disabilities. It also protected immigrants. It also protected women, and some of them eventually began to protect the LGBT community. This is why the paleocons in the 70s were talking like horribly about LGBT people, because at the time they weren't protected. They would at least protected marginalized groups of people in this country, okay? And because of that, from the late 60s, early 70s, up until a man named Harvey Milk was elected on the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco, you can get away with firing a gay person. You can get away with, well, back in the 50s, you can get away with basically trying to say, I don't want to hire you because you're gay. I don't want you to move my building because you're gay. I don't want you working in my supermarket because you're gay. And I don't want you teaching my children because you're gay. So what happened was, I'm going to give you a little history because this ties into what he's saying. He wrote in one of his books that gay people basically were fired from being teachers in California because they wanted to teach homosexuality in the schools. And Ricky Williams and Beverly Betty were one of the people that have spoke out and spoke about this. And they got the information from David Barton. David Barton is a liar. That's not what happened. What happened was they were fired because they were gay and lesbian. And there was Proposition 8. And Proposition 8 was to pass, and it was to be voted in 1978 to make sure that, well, 1977 and 8, to make sure that they would never, ever be allowed back to teach in the school system. And so Proposition 8 does not pass. And all those teachers who were fired because they were openly gay and openly lesbian were granted their jobs back. And just like other teachers, throughout the country, just because they were gay, they taught the students. I had a teacher who was gay. One of the best teachers I ever had. And never once, ever, did they mention their private life to the kids. It's just the same as a heterosexual teacher. They don't talk about their private life to children. It's the same thing. But because of what's going on in California right now, where, yes, they are introducing LGBTQ literature, which to a point is really gratuitous, what Ricky was doing, he was using David Barton as a person to basically say, David Barton has said that they were going to do this, and they wanted to do this back in the 70s. That's not true at all. This is a revisionist in history. Now, I'm going to basically connect the two. There is a connection between Bevelin, this man, David Barton, and Ricky Williams. They're being used as tools to get this man back mainstream, okay? Now, a lot of what's going on in this country, i.e. the overturn of Roe v. Wade, the planning to overturn the Obergefell ruling, Supreme Court ruling, where gays and lesbians, bisexuals, transgenders can basically have the right to marry, just like heterosexual people. They want to overthrow that. That is their next move. And then they're going to plan to overthrow the Voting Rights Act protection, okay? And they're using Clarence Thomas, these groups, because it's not just David Barton, it's other groups of people. He's being used to carry this out, okay? Because Clarence Thomas is kind of a paleo-conservative too, but really more so his wife. His wife has an organization, I think it's called the Groundwell. She founded it. She's very rich, And she actually is one of the people that's pushing it, because there is an investigation going on where they're basically saying that Clarence Thomas is ruling in certain cases to lean in towards his conservative ideas. He's not interpreting the Constitution. He's ruling in favor of think tanks that are ultra conservative because of his wife being a person who runs these type of groups. She has these type of think tanks, and that it's possibly that he's being paid to do it. If he's being paid to do it, he can't be thrown off the bench. That is a crime. Now, if he's doing it because of his beliefs, that's wrong also. He's supposed to interpret the Constitution. He's not supposed to put his personal beliefs in line with how he rules with cases that come before him as a Supreme Court justice. You understand what I'm saying? And that goes for any justice. Same thing with appellate court judges. Different judges, you have to interpret the Constitution, whether it's the countries or the states. You understand? So I just want to throw that out. Now, looking at David Barton and what I just read, I know it was long, but I want everybody to know this because it affects all of us. It affects all people who have been historically marginalized in the United States of America. For my people who are black, we cannot allow this rollback of cases to continue. Like I said, I am pro-life. I'm not pro-birth. I'm pro-life. I don't want to even get to the concept of abortion, but now that Roe v. Wade doesn't have, you don't have federal protections for that, for the right to choose, next they're going to basically remove the right to contraceptives. Then I talked to you about gay marriage. Then they're going to go to possibly Brown v. Board of Ed. And that basically overruled Plessy v. Ferguson, where you could discriminate separate but equal, which we saw that didn't work, which is why Brown versus Board of Ed came. And that will destroy the legacy of the great Thurgood Marshall. We cannot let this go on as black people. Just like I know gay people are going to stand up and be like, oh, no, you're not tearing down gay marriage. Just like disability, people who are disability are going to say, you're not going to tear down our rights. You're not going to tear down our rights because they just gutted out the Miranda rights. A cop can arrest you without having to read your Miranda rights. And you can thank your Generation X members on the court. A lot of them are Gen Xers. They're not baby boomers like Alito and Thomas and Roberts. Yeah, it's something to think about also. This is a devastating thing that's going on in our country. And a lot of the Trump supporters, they believe and read his book. See, remember I told you I got introduced to this man going back to 2008, 2009. This man was propelled to the spotlight during the time Obama ran for president. And then Obama got elected, and many of these people, wasn't just him, would come out the woodwork and be like, we got to be around piece of cues because we got this man in office. It was a lot of it was because he was black. Now, there were other things too, but a lot of it was because he was black. Okay? And he wasn't like an i.e. Clarence Thomas kind of black person. You understand? Now, I also said to you that in 2012, this is when a lot of these books were coming out. Revisionist history. This is when you have the pseudo revisionist history that was coming out, where they were basically rewriting the truth about what was going on, painting this beautiful picture of our founding fathers, which wasn't the case. And the founding fathers, if they were here, they would tell you that they wasn't perfect. And Thomas Jefferson is the person who actually did not want America to become a theocracy, because America could have. There were some people that were like, we want us to be a Christian nation, but they were like, no, because if we do that, then we will have a repeat of the Salem witch trials. That was one of the things that Thomas Jefferson quoted. You can hate him, you can love him, but if anything, for that to make this just a country where people could choose and there was no, defining religion, I gotta give it to him for that. But that I have to, because if we still were theocracy, I can tell you slavery would have never ended, and we as black people would be beyond third-class citizens. I mean, we wouldn't have the greatness that we achieved. if this would have been solely a Christian nation. Another thing I want to say also, and about Bevel and Betty and her husband, what they're doing, they're basically acting as pawns in a bigger scheme, which is basically rolling back our country to I would say 1940s, early 1950s Jim Crow American South. If these people continue to do this, because I want to say Bevel and Betty, and I'm going to post photos of these people and videos. Bevel and Betty is already on the GLAAD watch list. This black woman can end up being just on this list of the Southern Poverty Law Center, where once you end up there, you're basically blacklisted pretty much from American mainstream society. And I feel as though her husband is working in cahoots with this man. I feel that her husband basically has either worked with this man in the past, or worked for War Builders, or worked for one of the nonprofits, but he's somewhere connected between David Barton and Jenny Thomas, who is Clarence Thomas' wife, Virginia Lane Thomas. And there's basically an urgency with these people to make this happen, the rollbacks, and to put these people back at the forefront of society before we, as everyone else, came up and was mainstream. And they're using black people to do it. I was on Ricky Williams' page a couple of weeks ago, and I saw where he posted, next we're going after LGBTQ and gay marriage. Okay? So this is not a hysteria. They're going to do this. Like, they're already talking about how you can get arrested if you're pregnant and you cross state lines because you want to basically choose how you want to determine your pregnancy. They're trying to basically ban contraceptives. They're basically trying to make it so where you can't teach black history. They're calling it critical race theory, but no elementary school or even high school teaches critical race theory. They only teach black history, but the hysteria of them saying critical race theory because they don't want children to learn the truth about this country. And I've talked about David Barton. I won't really talk about him again unless I do like a digital, a video content creation on my channel, which I am going to be moving in that direction soon. But I really am going to talk about Bevel and Betty and her husband, because I want my people to have their antennas up, because a lot of our people are very trusting when they hear black people talk about the Bible, the love of Jesus Christ, and they fall into that and follow them. Then they learn that these people are not serving interests at all for black people. They're either mostly detrimental more so than helpful. They're really harmful and dangerous. And so I feel that I have to be the one to do it, because I'm a person who is a hardened history lover. I love history so much that I walk around with so many facts in my brain that off the top I could quote when such happened. And when I see and when I look at what's going on now, particularly the past couple of years, it makes me cry. It tears me up to know that people are retelling the story and the history of what's going on in our country, even going into my community and my black history. And I'm like, oh no, I can't let this go on, because then what will happen? Martin Luther King will be a white boy from Memphis, Tennessee. Malcolm X will basically be a white boy from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who basically advocated for the Klan because they saved his father. We have to basically step up to the plate, all of us collectively, and tell the truth about our history, because we can't let the pseudoism continue. And with that being said, I know it was long. Oh, and one more thing before I go. Romans was written by Paul, and a lot of Paul's writings do deal with homosexuality and abortion, and talking about certain things, but really homosexuality. A lot of what you read about in the Bible when it comes to homosexuality, that's Paul. That's not really God speaking about it. That's really Paul. And Paul was a person who was named Saul of Tarsus, and he came from what is known as modern day Turkey, and they used to kill Christians. And then he was blinded, and then he had this epiphany, and then he wanted to basically follow Christ. He ends up being hanged, but Paul is a controversial figure as such, because a lot of people who are religious scholars, they feel that Paul made up a lot of things. So a lot of paleoconservatives quote Paul, and Paul is good. His writings are really top notch, but a lot of what he said that God said, a lot of people feel that's what he was saying. He was putting his own personal beliefs. So I want to make that clear. So that's what it comes with that. I know a lot of people disagree with me, and it's okay. But I just want people to take what I read and what I said, and just pretty much protect our history, particularly Black history, because they're coming for Black people. They're coming for us. And with that being said, it's your girl, Miss Analytical. I'm signing off. Please share this. Please comment. Please subscribe. Please hit the notification bell. And I will talk to you later.